Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Change podcast, where we introduce you to people and ideas shaping the MENA region. My name is Vuk, and today we'll be talking about something really refreshing: the power of youth and how can they affect corporate innovation. My guest today is Karan Deep, Head of Innovation and Partnerships at GEMS Education. Welcome, Karan.
Hi, Vuk. Thank you for having me here.
Thanks for coming. I was looking forward to our conversation, and we not only that we had couple of sessions already, but I also talked with a lot of people who had high and nice things to say about you and the work that you're doing with GEMS Education and even before. So I'm really looking forward to our discussions. We'll be talking a bit more about you and your take on innovation and how you're leveraging this very unique position that you have to impact innovation, working with youth. So before we deep dive in that topic, I'd like you to bring us closer to yourself, your career path to GEMS Education and your career path to UAE after all.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Thanks for having me here, Vuk. You ended the question with career path to the UAE. I think my career path is very different from most people. I was brought up here, so I'm a desert kid. But I've been with GEMS for about 7 years now. I'm, like you said, I'm the head of innovation and partnerships. And what I do is a twofold aspect. So the first one is commercial innovation, helping future-proof and evolve the organization from what they have been doing to what they should be or could be doing. And the second one is the more interesting one. It's education innovation, is how can I work with people smarter than myself to really change and adapt education for a modern age. So one satisfies the brain, the other satisfies the soul.
Interesting to put it like that. And what made you curious and interested in this type of work when it comes to innovation, especially? What got you hooked?
I think that's a very open-ended question, and I think it comes down to personality. You can't learn innovation. You can learn frameworks of innovation, but for me I was always a person who liked to ask questions and liked to find better answers, and that's always gone in my career path. And even at GEMS, I joined as something else, but within 2 months I realized there was a gap between vision and execution, and I said, why don't we set this up? So it was all about asking the right questions and helping people find the right answers, and I think that's what innovation is.
No, nice. The other question would be, how do you define innovation? So you
that's another podcast, but happy to answer that.
No, obviously the whole topic of innovation, and now after 28th episode of the Change podcast on this topic, I think that we are already getting or not getting an answer on what the innovation is, and it's a broad topic. And
but that's the beauty of it, right? Different people have different definitions. As long as you keep it broadly open. For me, I think because the word innovation has been in my job title for a long time, I've had many conversations about it, and I actually don't like that word. I don't like how it's used because it's a very narrow definition. It's either just technology or just a press release. So how can you make it a mindset?
That's true. An amazing episode that they did with MP when we talked about that, how innovation is a part of the culture, etc., etc. Link below. But
hey MP,
this is hey MP. Yes, this is a. Sending greetings to MP, who started the avalanche of my visit, my guests. When you say innovation and that the word is being misused, what is that about innovation that you passionately disagree with?
Very good question. I think it was just what we spoke about, right? It's innovation is. What do I disagree about innovation? It is not a short-term thing. It can be a short-term thing. Innovation isn't necessarily something radically new. Everything we do in our day-to-day lives could be iterative or moderately transformative innovation. And innovation doesn't have to be a big show. What can you do to make things better? If you bring about a systemic global change, great. But that shouldn't stop you, that if something is not a big change or if something is not new, it shouldn't be. And then there's a whole other conversation about what do corporates look for in innovation, but
that we're going to leave it for another episode.
Yeah.
What makes a good innovator?
Asking questions. Keep asking questions and keep challenging yourself. I think a good thing about when you're innovating, you are asking questions. You are often challenging the mindsets. You're often challenging the norms. And more often than challenging others, you're challenging yourself. So I think you have to be comfortable with change, and you have to be comfortable being challenged. And only once you get around those obstacles, then you can innovate how you want, where you want, in which industry you want.
Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, obviously, a lot of companies out there are looking for people who can help them transform, who can help them innovate, etc. It's a hot topic, and definitely there is a reason for it. And a lot of them are in pursuit of profiles who can help them. What kind of profile should the one? I hope that I'm framing this question right, but there is a lot of innovators out there who are just self-proclaimed innovators, right? What makes you a good innovator when it comes to track record, when it comes to education, when it comes to your experience, so that you can be the one actually leading transformation, innovation of a company?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say two things. Someone who's had a track record of bringing about some change. So there would be two things. The first one is who's brought about change of some sort. Change management is hard. So if you brought about a change that's gotten people to adapt it in whatever context, that's a good thing. Means you created something that people wanted. And the second one, which is the more difficult one, is how can you sustain it, right? Otherwise, innovation just dies off as a one-off activity or a, look what we did for 1 year. But sustaining innovation is probably the more important reason.
Makes sense. Okay, let's talk a bit more about GEMS and some of the stuff that you guys are working on at GEMS. So one of your and GEMS ways of transformation is through acceleration programs, right?
Yep.
Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Well, we have all sorts of acceleration programs and journeys. We done corporate acceleration as well. So, we involved 200 people across the company to identify problems, opportunities, and that was a really great exercise. We had people from our CXOs to different kinds of teachers to our technology managers to even nurses and front of house staff, all coming together to create different opportunities and different action plans that we could take forward. So that's corporate innovation. But what's more exciting for me is student and teacher innovation. Yeah. So for us, it's all about what is innovation in education, right? So the world is changing. It's rapidly growing, and we don't really know what's happening in the future. Depending on which report you read, between 65% to 80% of the jobs in 10 years' time do not exist today. So today's middle schooler or today's even high schooler, by the time they graduate from school, and if they're going to university, by the time they graduate from university, it's a completely different world. So that's why we need to change how education is from a centuries-old system to just make it more relevant. It's all about new skills, it's all about new opportunities, and it's all about new exposure.
And I agree, it's one of the industries that hasn't changed that much over the previous, couple of decades or more. And it definitely does deserve a significant change, especially, having in mind the rapid pace that we're going through when it comes to changes around us. And you're working directly with students, right?
Yes.
How do you enable them? Can you unpack your whole approach to students at GEMS? What do you do with them?
Right. Yeah. Well, if I had to base it into pillars, there are 3 different pillars that we look at. First one is curriculum. What are you actually learning? Is it still relevant? And what needs to be updated? Because now the world is changing with exponential technologies, emerging technologies, and new ways of working because everything's globalized now. So what new curriculum can you bring in? And we've done quite a bit of that. Second is application. Now that you've learned what you want to learn, can you actually build something? And that's where we've created accelerator programs, innovation challenges with regional and global industry leaders and governments as well. And the third one is integration. So it's not just enough doing it in your own silo, right? You can't just be within your school doing all the great things that you do. But how can you actually be prepared for the future of work? Let's work with the future of work, right? So it's all about experiential education with corporates, with universities, the stages of life that you're going to get into it sooner.
And it's interesting, and I'd like to talk about this whole topic a bit more now. High schools.
Yeah.
Usually, students at high schools are still not really, doing any major studying or getting a lot of experience, right? I mean, I didn't. I mean, at high school, I was just, looking to how to, go through. I was
how to pass.
Exactly. I was doing some sports, etc. But I wasn't really thinking of that much about my future. When the time for me to enroll to college came, I was like, oh, what should I do now with my life, etc. And I think it's a great opportunity to shape these great minds into profile them and direct them in some ways where they can significantly impact their surroundings, industries, economy that they will be, working in. So, what do you think about the overall approach so far? What's going on in this country and this region, and after all in the world? And the importance of young people when it comes to the future of obviously the question is like, obviously they're important, but you know what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah. So what's been going on has what's been going on, right? There are a lot of good things happening, but it hasn't been enough to bring about a change. There are many challenges that have existed, right? So firstly, the formal education process is broken, right? It's no longer relevant because we still learn about, or the way we are taught is not personalized enough or not future focused enough to get to it. But the main challenge is it's a mindset change, right? One of the reasons why education has taken so long to change is because entire communities are involved. It's your government, it's your teachers, it's your parents. Each of these stakeholders with all good intentions have obstacles, right? I've had parents come up to me and say, all that you do is great, do all the experimentation you want, but don't experiment with my kid, right? Because I went through school, I went through the system, and now I'm this title at this company, so it worked out great for me. Why should it change? Well, because the world is changing. And because of that, the system is built in that way, right? So your KPIs for your educators, your KPIs for organizations are very either enrollment focused or business focused. There are obviously education focused, but not about change in education focus as well. And because we're talking about ecosystems, corporates work in a silo, education works in a silo, universities work in a silo. But why? Because we are going to go to that stage anyway. So let's break down the silos and let's get onto it.
No, for sure, yeah. I think that the opportunity is great, and that we'll be facing some radical changes in the future when it comes to even what happened this year is an example of that. And that there is a huge opportunity with shaping these young minds in the right direction where they can come up with some breakthrough ideas. And you guys have some examples in GEMS as well. I think there was one developed a wearable object detection device for the visually impaired grade 8 student, right? Those are great examples of kids who came up with some awesome ideas, and how to prepare them for the future so they do this continuously and repeatedly, right?
And that's where those 2-3 pillars that I spoke about, right? That's where they came in. All these students, amazing talent, amazing exposure to, they're digital first and digital natives, right? So how can we help fine tune them? And that's what we did. So we created something called a Global Innovation Challenge. It had its humble beginnings about 4 years ago when we started because I'm an entrepreneur, or at least I like the mindset of an entrepreneur. And I'm like, why don't these kids are doing it anyway. Let's give them a good structure. Let's give them a good opportunity. So we created the Xcelerator Programme, and it was run in partnership with Silicon Valley-based Singularity University. And the brief given to GEM students around the world is, can you build a prototype, a working prototype, addressing a global challenge such as access to clean drinking water, space exploration, disaster resilience, and much more, but something that can positively impact hundreds of millions of people, right? So we didn't want a PowerPoint presentation. We didn't want a fluffy idea. We wanted you to build something. And it's an 8-month-long program with a pre-accelerator and accelerator with a whole structured stage gating, boot camps, shortlisting, everything. And I'm proud to say now, after 4 years, it's one of the world's largest of its kind. We begin with 50,000 students every year in the pre-accelerator phase.
Wow.
And shortlisted to the top. So, within schools, we provide them the resources and frameworks to shortlist their top students, and they submit it to a showcase event.
Yeah.
This year's top shortlisted students were 1,500 students across 400 teams.
Oh, wow.
So these are actually 400 prototypes that
Wow.
have been built across the community.
And I think that's absolutely an amazing example of what can be done even at this stage of education, right?
Yeah.
I mean, imagine this scaled to other, schools as well. And then there is a massive opportunity in these young people impacting business transformation when they eventually reach that stage.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Like, if you prepare them the right way, right?
And that's the gap, right? There's a gap in the future of skills, right? There is a gap because the world has moved so fast, and the gap between education and industry is just increasing. So how do you reduce that gap? And that's what we've kind of done. We've consciously involved more private sector and public sector into the learning process, right? So we introduced a new initiative 2 years ago called the Centers of Excellence, and it completely changes the way how you look at high schools. So when I talk about accelerator, imagine if an accelerator is your high school experience. So in the morning, Wook is meeting MP in her office in EY to learn about business planning. In the afternoon, I'm meeting my peers to discuss about what we've learned and how can we help that project. Tomorrow, I go out to the desert to conduct some action research for my project. And in the evening, I'm working with Facebook in their office on their R&D for new digital things, all while being guided and mentored by my teacher in school. So this way, the more you're interacting with industry professionals or subject matter experts, you're getting exposed to those skills and those processes already. So by the time you even touch 16 or 18, you're already ready to hit the ground running and probably be hired as a associate from day one.
Yeah, because at one point, I mean, not so long in the future, 5 years from now, that person will be actually sitting in a corporation on some junior, role where they will be already having some impact, So if we bring into perspective of this discussion corporate innovation, let's establish from your perspective and understanding of challenges that corporate innovation is facing so that we can then address it with...
I think challenges of corporate innovation, right? If I had to sum it up, it's just different agendas. There are so many ideas out there. There's so many people out there. How do you prioritize what is what? There are challenges faced by organizations, very legitimate challenges, but challenges faced by organizations to prioritize short-term versus long-term. Prioritize idea A versus idea B. Should you focus only on technology or should you complement it with? And how do you break barriers between that? I think one of the biggest challenges for innovation is experimentation and failure are taboos, especially in this region. Innovating means experimenting. Experimenting means treating it with slightly different metrics. You cannot say go innovate and then say I want a 50x returns within 6 months time and where are the thing. You will fail, you could fail, but what's more important is how do you take those learnings and build it up from there.
Yeah, no, for sure. So if we bring in now young entrepreneurs, freshly graduates into perspective, how can they solve this in the future?
Yeah, well, this generation is the next, right? They are your next consumers, users, and eventually families. They are your next talent and workforce. and they are your next innovators, entrepreneurs, and builders. The difference between them and anyone born, 90s and before, is that they're digital first. They've been born in a world that is heavily globalized, so they've been exposed to ideas from around the world. They can easily search for any information that we would not know how to. So this has given them the confidence to do things. This has given them the ability to challenge things more. Because the more that you're exposed to different cultures, to different people, there are different thought ideologies out there. So instead of competing against thought ideologies, you are now collaborating with them. And this generation comes with that energy, with that confidence, and that the drive to convert thoughts into actions and initiatives out there. That is something that could be a very refreshing change in business. By the time people reach business, you're already streamlined in your way of thinking, you're already streamlined in your energies. So we need that challenge, or at least embraced in a way.
How can we make that happen now? So obviously there is a huge opportunity there. Corporations are suffering when it comes to innovation, and they need some radical changes. Is there any collaboration happening at the moment between corporations and this stage of education?
There is. There is in pockets. It could be better. We are trying to make it better. We've done something, but the pockets of collaboration could be as simple as talks. Right? If you go from the lowest to the highest, it could be as simple as talks. You have a WOOC come in and have a informative session or a workshop on digital media. Now that has exposed me to the industry of digital media, and then if I'm interested, I can deep dive into that. The second is new kinds of learning material or content, right? So industries are already working with actual tangible information that could really complement my skills. So besides learning my math and my English and science, I would like to learn about artificial intelligence. I would like to learn about blockchain or even cognitive sciences. So that happens. But usually what I see typically on a global scale is it's kind of reduced. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's reduced to competitions, right? Here you go. Here's a competition. Here's your question. Let's see what you got. And then there may be a prize thing. But I think it's missing the opportunity that it doesn't end at, a demo day or a showcase or a presentation. It's what can you actually learn from what these students have done and actually redefine strategies.
But I'm thinking now it's also difficult to approach someone who is, what's that age, 13, 14, not even less.
I mean, I've seen innovators as young as 9-year-old who's built an app for non-English, non-Arabic speakers to learn Arabic.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, that's amazing. Yeah. That's absolutely amazing. But I guess the approach as well needs to be, tailored to this age so that you actually get them hooked, because at that age they also want to have some fun. So they're not all about business.
It's not all about business, right? It's all about passion. And that's what's missing in education. It's how do you, passion is a strong word. You have to be passionate about everything, but like you said, it's difficult knowing what you're passionate about until when. It could come in when you're 10 years old, it could come in when you're 30, right? But it's all about your interests, right? You may not be that interested in trigonometry, but you want to learn how to play the guitar better, right? So how do we help get that along? And in fact, that statement is credible in many places, but another challenge of collaboration between corporates and education is, but they're just 13. What can they do? Yes, I'm not expecting them to be, scientists from day one and help you there. You never know. If that happens, great. But the 13-year-olds of today are not when we were 13, right? We were a different world. And people who have reached a certain stage, 13 for them was even a different world. 13-year-old today has consumed enough information and knowledge at the age of 13 till most people don't even do in their whole lives. So how can you help take advantage of that nativeness of information and savviness and work with that?
Which I think is also a massive opportunity. That kind of perspective and creativity. I was always amazed, when you think about, kids and at a very young age and the level of creativity they have. So you give them a pen, they're going to play with a pen and use their imagination to turn this pen into a teleport, bazooka. They're going to have a lot of fun. So it's interesting to think about how can you actually leverage this, and use these young bright minds to come up with some completely revolutionary ideas. But what are the biggest obstacles for us being there, next year? For the whole education transformation, and for this to actually happen and accelerate and actually reach the stage where it can or should be at one point.
That's a multifold thing, right? Because it comes back to the challenge of education, which is a ecosystem. So each different stakeholder needs to change or at least adapt, right? From schools in the first place, right? Having the flexibility to change. It's not easy, right? Your timetable, your scheduling, your teacher, and upskilling teachers. The world is changing for teachers as well. How do you get evolved teachers? How do you give them the right tools to upskill themselves and be good mentors? Then it's also about corporates. We live in a world where degrees aren't that important anymore. Universities are important if you want to specialize in something, but having a degree in X from University Y doesn't necessarily make me better than a student who doesn't have. In fact, more and more organizations are now dropping the requirement for a university degree, to the likes of Google and EY. It's all about skills and aptitude. And the third is about regulatory authorities, right? How can authorities of education understand? They do understand it, but how can they effectively bring in the right incentives, the right flexibilities, the right experimentations to do it, that you don't have to. So for example, in the British curriculum, one of the regulation requirements is to deliver a subject, you have to deliver it for a minimum X number of hours per week, right? But what if I want to change how everything is delivered, but then I can't get my approval or my accreditation because I'm not doing it? So it's a multifaceted change. It's going to take time, but we're already seeing some great stuff out there.
And I think this year obviously kind of surfaced up some technologies, especially, that are significantly helping and optimizing and transforming that industry. What part technology has in the... Traditionally, technology wasn't playing a major part in education at all.
It was good to have.
It was good to have, and just like, you heard about that fancy school that's having these smart boards, etc. But that was it. But this year things changed drastically, right?
This was, despite all the bad things that have happened this year, I liked this year because it removed everyone's excuses, right? Why can't I use technology? Well, now you have COVID. You have to use technology in a way. But the challenge has always been using it effectively, right? Like you said, there was an app and everything, and technology shouldn't be a gimmick. It should be effectively integrated. Only then it makes sense. And you're challenging people's behaviors. It shouldn't be another thing that I have to do. It should be integrated in a way. So I think the next year we're going to see a huge paradigm shift in attitudes towards technology, right? So video assisted remote learning is going to become the norm, and there's no longer going to be the need, at least in most parts of the world, to everyone go to the same school or the same classroom every time. So this allows for more flexibility. What does that flexibility allow? Now we have more time to think and do and create. So it's a huge ripple effect that it's going to play.
Awesome. So we have this amazing bright minds empowered now by technology, and on the other side we have world that needs to be changed and transformed, and usually those transformations are fortunately or unfortunately led by corporations. So to wrap up, what's your message for corporations when it comes to innovation, mixing it with these bright minds?
I think my message is the same for corporate innovation, which can be adapted to education, especially in school, is be braver, right? Times are changing, but people have changed. And when you were the 15-year-old of today is very different from when you were 15. So don't when you see a school student of today, don't project your own school student on themselves. Embrace them and then get into a conversation. And I'm sure you're going to learn so much more. For me, it's the best part of my job is working with the students.
I love your way of thinking, your approach, and I think definitely it's going to give results in future, and I can't wait to see how things develop. It's going to take some time, I'm sure, and it is a challenging mission, but I think it definitely has a purpose, and I can feel the passion talking to you. So good luck with that. Thanks everyone for staying with us until the end. I hope that we inspired you to act on some of your ideas, and I hope that Karan shared some insightful information with you that are going to help you just shape your way of thinking going forward. If you like what we're doing here with the Change Podcast, please like and subscribe. It's going to mean a lot to us. Please leave comments and feedback, ask any questions, reach out to Karan and me if you want to find out more or collaborate. And stay tuned until next Monday when another episode of the Change Podcast is going live. Thanks again. Thanks, Karan, for coming.
Thanks. Pleasure once again.
Same here, man. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.